Folks, we talk about every year how folks quote Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but typically it's only a couple of sermons or speeches that he gave. And as I said, what they really want is a Dr. King who is nice and loving and kind and really is a civil rights bobblehead or a civil rights teddy bear. Well, Michael Harriot, of course, founder of Contraband Camp, broke this thing down in his piece. Everyone claims to know what MLK would have wanted. They love talking about, oh, he wanted color blindness and silence and comfort. And Michael's like, nah, that's some bullshit. He joins us right now. Michael, glad to have you back on Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, it really does. Listen, I've even taken black audiences to task for only playing the bottom of his mountaintop speech, not the other 41 minutes. I said to the MLK, the City of Dallas event on Saturday, that we have stripped Dr. King of his militancy, his radicalness, his righteousness, and I played a bunch of clips last night, and it just again as every year goes by, he gets softer and softer and softer, and essentially America's going to turn him into basically Santa Claus.
Yeah, man. And we've been knowing this for a while, and it's part of the product of just whitewashing Black history as a whole, right? We hear the Martin Luther King we know today, when we celebrated for his birthday, white people hated him. Most white people hated him while he was alive, and it wasn't even close. It wasn't like 60%, right? Like the vast majority of white people had a positive reaction to everything Martin Luther King did. And when it comes to him speaking to people and what he would have wanted, everything that, we talk about today, DEI, wokeness, critical race theory, Martin Luther King explicitly said that he was in favor of all of that stuff. And the most famous speech that the most frequent speech that he gave was a speech called Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. And as you could guess, someone like Martin Luther King gave speeches all of the time. So he had a few, that he kept in his pocket and, he switched out every now and then. But most of the time when he was talking to Black audiences, he gave the Remaining Awake speech from 1956, before the end of the Montgomery bus boycott, all the way to, it was the last sermon he gave before he died. His entire civil rights career that we know, he gave this speech from the beginning to the end. It is the most it's the harbinger of what he would have wanted. It's the most explanatory of all of his things. And he would change it, every now and then. But the basic principle of it was, he would start out by talking about the story of Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle before the American Revolution. And when he woke up, it was a picture of George Washington over his bed. And he realized he had fallen asleep through a great revolution. And he would tell people, the first actual line-by-line recording of it that we see was at Morehouse College in 1958 when he spoke at the commencement ceremony. And he told them, like, if I want you to do anything, Michael, when you leave here.
Michael, hold on. So go to my iPad, Elise. This is from the King Institute at Stanford University, and then dated June 2nd, 1959. And this is the address. So, folk, y'all can actually read this so this is it right here. And again, if you put in that name, Michael, I also pulled up, he spoke at Oberlin College, June 1965, 6 years later. Same speech, Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution. And so there are others as well, but go ahead.
Yeah, and what he would do is basically tell this story and tell people the essential meaning of it was stay woke, right? You have to remain awake. During that time, white people hadn't figured out the phrase woke yet. So he would tell the students, like, the most important thing that you have to do is to recognize the circumstances that Black people are in and to always be cognizant of that, what we would call wokeness. And he would start out it's funny, by talking about 1619. Everything that Black people are going through started during 1619. He would talk about the need for, like, the bootstrap philosophy, he would call it, and the need to dismiss it, and to understand that if we are going to get any place in society, it's going to have to be with the help of the government. He later in his career, he began talking about reparations using this speech. So it is the thing that, like, the society as a whole dislikes now. But Martin Luther King was an advocate for all of that DEI, wokeness, critical race theory, 1619, like all of that stuff he was talking about 50 and 60 years ago.
In fact, this is actually, one of the things that he said is, go to my iPad, he said, there are all too many people who, in some great period of social change, failed to achieve the new mental outlook that the new situation demands. This is the 1965 Oberlin College speech. He says, there's nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution. There can be no gainsaying of the fact that a great revolution is taking place in our world today. It is a social revolution sweeping away the old order of colonialism. In our own nation, it is sweeping away the old order of slavery and racial segregation. The wind of change is blowing, and we see in our day and our age a significant development. Victor Hugo said on one occasion that there is nothing more powerful in all the world than an idea whose time has come. In a real sense, the idea whose time has come today is the idea of freedom and human dignity. Wherever men are assembled today, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. And so we see in our own world a revolution of rising expectations. The great challenge facing every individual graduating today is to remain awake through this social revolution. And so to your point, he's walking through these things, and he's challenging folks' conventional wisdom. But he's also saying to folks is, you might have your college degree, but your ass can't be complacent.
Right. That's exactly what he was saying. There was this part in the speech where he says, like, your excellence is not going to be enough. You have to, essentially, that phrase we all know, work twice as hard to get half as far. And you have to know this, again, because you have to be awake. And what's interesting is that, like, he gave it in Indianapolis. And when he gave it in Indianapolis, before he arrived to give his speech, they stopped him at the airport and they asked him, who was responsible for most of this racial problems that America has? And he said, well, it's the executive department of the federal government. J. Edgar Hoover was so mad that he went through all of his DOJ lawyers' private papers and found the ones who had NAACP members and pressured them to drop their NAACP membership. One refused, Derek Bell, the guy, and so he quit. And that's the guy who created what we now know as critical race theory. So, like, all of this stuff that we're talking about today, they were talking about back then. And it's now that they've made King this cuddly, superhero / teddy bear, that they want to separate him and the man from the things that he believed and the things that he was fighting for. And that's why this is important.
This is the piece right here from a local radio station. What's sad is, it is unbelievable this is the case. It says King's 1959 speech at the Fall Creek YMCA, this is in Indianapolis, was titled Remaining Awake Through Revolution. There are no known recordings of King's address, but local papers provided extensive coverage.
Yep. And that's the address where, that sparked the whole thing with Derek Bell. And there are quotes from that. Like, one, he said that segregation is just slavery in new clothes. And that was reported in the newspapers. And again, right, like, the idea that King was, we've heard before, like, I'm more Malcolm than Martin. And that's because those people who say that have accepted the whitewashed version of King as if he wasn't a revolutionary, right? They changed nonviolent resistance to just nonviolence and left out the resistance part and forget that this was one of the greatest revolutionaries in American history.
Yeah, and that is what is so that is what is so frustrating. But the point that I keep making is that Black folks have got to stop doing that as well. We've got to stop minimizing. And listen, I have done MLK speeches all around this country for the last 2 decades. And Michael, it drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when I'm sitting there and it's a Black organization and it's a nearly all Black audience. And I'm like, here we go. All right, here we go. We're gonna play I Have a Dream. We're not gonna play the tough stuff. We're gonna play little boys and little girls, you know. We're gonna play the part that's gonna make RG3 real comfortable. Then we're gonna sit here and we're gonna, then we're gonna sit here and we're gonna do the mountaintop. We might hear a drum major for justice. We might hear that. But basically, we could sit here and say, you're going to hear 4, max 5 different MLK speeches. That's it. You ain't gonna never hear somebody play I'm Black, I'm proud, I'm beautiful. You ain't gonna never hear that one. You ain't gonna never hear, and you're not gonna hear him call out, like for instance, when he went to Chicago in 1966, and this is in the book Fire on the Prairie, he said, if we could convince the Chicago Negro to stand with us, we could convince every Negro in America. He specifically called out the Negroes in Chicago who were more than willing to be on the plantation of Mayor Daley than stand up for Black people. And that includes that Reverend Jackson at that church in Chicago. And you got this little conservative Negro running around, Chio Jackson, Jabal, what the hell his name is, now trying to do a reinterpretation, saying King was under the influence of communists and he really wasn't a Christian. And now you got these dumbass Black folks now repeating this stuff, said, oh, he didn't believe in the Trinity, he didn't believe in Mary. And these people just stuck on stupid. But again, they want to not only reduce him to a cuddly teddy bear, they also want to redefine him. This is what Charlie Kirk was all about and Turning Point USA, because they do not want another generation of white folks to truly know what this man was about and who he was fighting.
Right. Like, and the other thing is, right, like they have this whole idea of King that's based in like these politics of respectability, right? Like they forget, like when you were talking about King in Chicago, who was he living in? He went to the gangs in Chicago and had them meet with each other because he wasn't about respectability politics. But, Shirley Eiffel said one thing, told a story one thing, and she says, well, what the marginalization, what this attack on King is about and this attack on civil rights is about is that they have always been jealous that our story is a story of nobility and revolutionary that they have never been able to attain, right? They have to bring down King because they have no equivalent person on their side who was that willing to fight for truth and justice for everybody. They don't have, there is not a white equivalent to Dr. King. And so to even make him realistic, they have to besmirch his name because they can't even raise up someone to his level. They'll never be able to do it. And so it's the idea that they want to have a story, and their story can never match our story. When we talk about fascism and this authoritarian government that we're seeing now, right? One of the things that I always point out is, how they always bring up these analogies of Hitler and fascism in Italy, when black people in America are the only people in the world to defeat a fascist regime without an army, without a military, and without violence. And so they want to destroy that story. They want to give an alternative fact, make it an alternative fact. And this is the way that they do it, by whitewashing some of our stories and by demonizing some of our heroes.
Well, absolutely. And I think what our responsibility, again, as African Americans, and I played Bomani Jones's commentary on this yesterday, this is where we must be controlling the narrative, controlling our own story. This is one of the reasons why we don't take off on King Day, because we know damn well mainstream white media is not going to cover all the stuff that happens, and and so our whole deal is like, no, we're going to tell that story, and so this is a moment. Look, this idiot's going to be there for the next 3 years. We see what he stands for and he believes, and this is where you saw the reaction in Florida when black folks said, hey, we're going to start teaching our own. We got no choice. If we're sitting here and rightfully fighting the banning of books and the things along those lines, what we should be doing is saying, hey, we're going to encouraging folks to buy those books, expanding black reading clubs, saying to young folks and others that this is what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and say this here. Black folks, every time I turn around, they have all these gift bags and all these events. Guess what? Start filling those gift bags with black books that also laying our history out. I would love to see one of these organizations say, hey, when you leave here, you're going to get a copy of MLK's book, Chaos or Community, or your book, Black AF, my book, White Fear, whatever, because this is what has to happen, because these folks, we know what their game plan is. They want to eradicate black people. They want to eradicate black history. They don't want to hear black authors. They don't want you reading Toni Morrison, Nikki Giovanni. They don't want you reading nobody. And that's their whole game plan.
Right. And the other thing about it is, they know that they can't, right? Like, the reason we're sitting here talking is because they haven't been able to erase Martin Luther King's true legacy, right? Like, all of this stuff that they're pushing about CRT and, fake history and, the National Museum of African American History and Culture is too radical. And people are still going to the NMA, to the Blacksonian. People are still, like, my book over the past year has been the most popular history book, not black history book in America. They can't stop us. And this is the futile effort that they're putting forward to put forth their agenda, because they know it contradicts what we have made America. The thing that America is, the thing that they love about America is the stuff that we made it. It is an economic powerhouse because our labor made it an economic powerhouse. It is a bastion for truth and justice that they claim, even though they've never afforded it to us, because of what we made it. Like, the reason they get to call it a democracy is because of the stuff that black people did. And now that they get to bask in all of that glory and be the envy of the world, they want to destroy the legacy and make it look as if they did it. They're returning to colonialism, trying to take countries and invade other sovereign nations and depose presidents, because this is what they do. And the only thing that has ever stopped them is us. And that's what they're trying to erase, that story.
Well, and that point there, to close it out, what also drives them crazy is that that movement has been exported. That movement, I say all the time, during the Arab Spring, when you saw dudes in Egypt and other countries literally having "I am a man" signs, which of course popularized from Memphis, the sanitation workers. Andrew Young always says, when I talk to him, he said, Dr. King is not dead. He physically is not here. He said, but every single day, somewhere in the world, he said, somebody is talking about him, talking about his message or playing his speeches. And he said, that's what we have to remember. And so again, this is where we have to call upon our people. to elevate, because again, I keep saying I don't want to see another black person go, all I know is the little bits from two different speeches. No, we got to go much deeper and broader when it comes to what he had to say. And so, folk, go to my iPad at least. So y'all check out, y'all. I got it. It's guys. This is it right here. I know what I'm doing. Go to it, please. Thank you. This is Contraband Camp, okay? Contrabandcamp.com. This is the article. You see it right here. Remaining Await Through a Great Revolution. Check out this piece by Michael Harriot. You will see it right here on the website. Article is going to come up. And so definitely check it out, folks. Again, and support Contraband Camp because real work is being done, and that's absolutely necessary. And after you do that, actually go and listen to that speech. Go to Google. It's all there because it was the last sermon that he gave before that April 3rd, 68 speech, before he was assassinated. So y'all be sure to check it out. Michael, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I'm bringing my panel right now. Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for environmental justice at the EPA out of D.C. Dr. Melva Wallace, president, CEO, Houston Tillotson University out of Austin. Joe Richardson, civil rights attorney out of L.A. Mustafa, I'm going to start with you. This is the thing that I'm telling you. It just absolutely, it really does drive me crazy. I've done way too many MLK Black History Month events, and I will tell that audience, can y'all please stop playing just the same two portions of the same damn speech?
Well, that's the part that's palatable, right? That's the part that most folks feel comfortable in, inviting into their space. When you start to talk about somebody who is radical or revolutionary or someone who embraced reparations, for some folks that becomes an uncomfortable conversation. And we have to learn to continue to grow and expand and understand that there was so much more to Dr. King. Economic justice is an issue that I worked on for years. Economic justice is civil rights. Dr. King, of course, in the latter part of his career, people began to focus. His message was in that space as well. What I loved about Dr. King is that he made sure that we understand that love is important, but love is not soft, that justice is not passive, and that democracy only survives if we practice it every day and if we do it together. Part of Dr. King's strength was that he loved Black people. He wanted to make sure that Black people were in a better space, but he also understood that there were other individuals who were also being impacted, and he didn't exclude them. But at the same time, he made sure he kept his focus on our community, who would continue to carry the burdens in this country for hundreds of years. So we have to make sure that we are sharing the real narrative, especially in a time when there's so misinformation and disinformation that continues, as Michael said, to water down or to whitewash our history. We've got to make sure that we're telling the correct story, the full story, and the story that helps us to continue to grow.
At least go to my iPad. Melva, this is the thing here. So the King Institute at Stanford University, they put out 7 volumes called the King Papers. It's called the Papers of Martin Luther King Jr. The goal is to do 14 volumes. And so if you go to their site, so far they have 7. Matter of fact, I was just sitting here texting Claiborne Carson, who leads it, to saying, hey, when do we get the next one? And so this provides the level of depth that we need to understand that this man goes far beyond just a couple of words. There's another book called King. We dropped the interview. Folks should go to our YouTube channel. It's called King of the North. And it talked about the role that he played about what's happening in the North as well, also the West. So King wasn't defined just to the South.
Yeah, and so the challenge is believing that, that's anything. We have to begin to understand that people are more than what we see the media tell us that they are, right? And so whose fault is it that we don't know more about this great man? It's our fault. It's our community's fault. We have to do a better job, especially, educators and people that do that. If we reduce a legacy to 2 speeches, then that's our fault. As a people, that's our fault. So we have to do a better job of communicating in learning how to learn who people are. That means reading more about who he was, reading more about his family, understanding the kind of person that he was, and that's teaching our young people how to think and how to think critically about what is being presented. Because yes, Martin Luther King, an incredible human, but how do we still deal nowadays with who people tell us they are in the media? And so we have to begin to critically think along the way and research the people who we want to know more about. And our HBCUs do it well, our schools do it well. But you brought up a great point about the books. It's learning more about your community, and it's how to learn is what we have to do. And that's where we might have missed the mark, is reducing this man to two speeches.
Joe, also what has to happen, and I'm just a firm believer in this, that we have to expand this beyond just him. When I look at my library, when I look at the things that I study, when I look at the things that I read, there were so many people who played a pivotal role, known and unknown. And so I keep saying his holiday is not about him. It's do with it what he did when he got the Nobel Peace Prize, accepting it on behalf of the whole movement. We need to be, again, expanding our knowledge. I tell the story when I was reading, and I know my next guest probably has read this book. It was the book Showdown on the Thurgood Marshall confirmation hearings by Will Haygood. And in there, he talked about Henry and Harriet Moore, and the work they were doing in Florida. And their home was firebombed on Christmas Day, and they died of their injuries. And he said there was a museum dedicated to them on those grounds in Sanford, Florida. I was like, what? And I said, man, I had no idea. And I spent time down there, obviously, because of the Trayvon Martin case. And so I remember when we did our show on Bethune-Cookman College, and I was driving actually I think I was driving to Orlando for something. I was driving to Fort Lauderdale. I was driving to Fort Lauderdale for something. And I'm on the highway, and I see the Henry Moore Museum. And I immediately turned around and went back, and it was closed. But I shot some video, did some things along those lines. And that's the thing. I mean, so their story is just as important as Dr. King, is just as important as Medgar Evers. So we got to be making sure our folk have a much broader understanding of our history.
And one of the things that's important about that is that's going to give us encouragement, and that's going to give us confidence. A lot of what we hear now are the frustrations that many of us naturally have with what we see going on right now. But this is still nothing compared to what they dealt with 50, 100 years ago, 35, 40 years ago. And to really be able to dig into that, Roland, now you're going to understand how much history, how much work has to be done to actually erase our history. But it's a race for us to make sure that we're continuing to preserve and uncover it. So not only for those that we know, the Ida B. Wells Barnett and the Sojourner Truth and the Harriet Tubman, but and the Thurgood Marshalls, but the other lawyers that were part of the movement, the other people that worked in the labor movement, the other folks that integrated lunch counters, etc. Because what happens is we can be encouraged and we can be uplifted by the fact that there were so many of them. And that's why it had as much success as it did. The civil rights movement was incredibly disciplined. Martin always talked about how he took things from the gentleman that he took a lot of things from was connected to Gandhi, at least in terms of studying and those types of things. There's so much out there to be taken and to be replicated and also to be encouraged by. And right now, that's going to allow us, without minimizing what we might be seeing right now, the perspective that we need to know that if they could handle it and keep going. Some of our previous generations, I said this in church the other day, some of our previous generations said, even if not for me, then for them. They hoped for things for us that they had no belief necessarily that they would see themselves or for themselves to enjoy. And so if we look at that, and listen, woke is Bible, okay? Romans 13:11, Ephesians 5:14, woke is Bible. Okay, and Martin was Bible, and he was radical all of the above. So let's embrace it, learn as much as we can about it, him and others, so that it can strengthen us going forward.
And at least go to my iPad. I must have offloaded the videos, but luckily I had. So it's called the Harriet T. and the Harriet V. Moore Memorial Park in Brevard County. And then this is actually the museum. It sits on the site where their home was firebombed by racists there in Florida. And again, they were doing the work out there fighting on behalf of voting rights. And so just one of the things that we need to understand. Our history is there. All right, folks, check out that article by Michael Harriot, In Contraband Camp.